Okay, boys, looks like we are live.
Yeehaw.
I like it.
Yeehaw. So we're here with Kurt Wenger, Senior Design Engineer for Associated Electrics, and most importantly, the Team Associated brand. Spencer Rivkin, two-time IFMAR World Champion, and myself, Team Manager Brent Thielke for the Team Associated Race Team. So I want to kind of download a little bit from the JConcepts Western Carpet Nationals that were a few weeks ago up at 702 RC Raceway. Mm-hmm. This was the debut event for the B6.3. And yeah, I mean, we had some fun. It'd been a while since Spencer had been on carpet. I don't remember the last time Kurt raced on carpet. I was in Florida in November racing some rugs. So definitely not our forte, I wouldn't say, but also a lot of fun and definitely a growing part of the U.S. market, and it's been around the international scene for quite a while. So, yeah, I don't know, Spencer, if you want to kind of download a little bit kind of what you thought, just kind of going into the event. And I know you mentioned that, you kind of had a different strategy than what you'd had in the past, just, being a little bit more mature driver. And, kind of being a little bit more in tune with the products.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it's awesome to see us kind of starting kind of our live videos through Team Associated. It's been pretty awesome to kind of been doing it on our personal pages as far as Dustin and I. It's been about 2 years since I've actually been on the track at 702. The last time I was there was for that JConcepts NCTS race 2 years ago. And obviously with the product development that we've done along the way, there was a lot of new setup stuff that I've learned, with obviously the new release of the B6.3 and some of the new rear end parts that kind of changes kind of how the car drives and the high speed turns, how it steers. I feel like as far as just jumping right into it with, we'll call it a hiatus break. I was really shocked. I built the car. I built my car right from the kit setup. I really didn't know what to start with. It was kind of a whole new learning experience to me. I kind of wanted to come in with an open-minded observation of how much traction the track had, and obviously the tires that we ran were a little bit different than the last time I ran. I ran like the bigger diameter tires. And as far as like the learning experience goes, we had a full, I had pretty much 2 days of practice, and working with Kurt and everything really kind of helped, working with Cole, Lee, of course you, Brent, you kind of switched over your car, which we'll get into a little bit later, I'm sure. Yeah, it was awesome. I really was stoked on showing up with my car right out of the box. And I felt like some of the stuff that I've learned over the years past, being a little bit more of a mature racer, I feel like I've smoothed out a ton with my throttle response and braking and just kind of the fine detail with, steering corrections and so forth. Not to mention, definitely no excuse. The last time I was on carpet, I switched over to my new electronics, and I've learned a ton of new stuff with turbo and boost, which I really appreciate the guys like you, Brent, and Kurt, kind of having some of you guys' own opinions of what I should try. And, all that stuff is really important. And the drivability right out of the box for the car standpoint was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious that you came into the event a little bit more mature than you were a few years ago, and just a little bit more experienced from a racecraft standpoint. So that was fun to see the evolution throughout the whole event. Kurt, when was the last time you had raced on carpet?
Yeah, I thought some interesting stuff to bring up was I raced the last time on the gray carpet. So I've never run on the famous black carpet, which was kind of, like Spencer was saying, a transition in the industry. And then the development of the carpet tires has changed a lot. The overall diameter across the tire And then the sidewall height is so small now, and then the width is narrower. Like you can see, it barely overhangs the wheel.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff we did with, the guys have been doing in racing and stuff, but that's why like the B6 platform has the adjustable axle heights, and then the hex adapter width, to get the car and on high traction to be able to corner fast, you want the tires out as wide as possible. So that's one of the things we do, and then taking the toe in out. But I was impressed with these. This is the twin pins JConcepts tire, which everybody ran as a spec tire, and this was my first time to use them, and the wear was good, just getting everything dialed in for the tire diameter. I know when you see the setup sheet that we're going to publish, you'll see that because this tire is smaller, and we're running like axle height 2 and 3 on carpet, you're typically going to run a longer shock link, because you want, when the car corners, to be able to have the wheel droop down. But then we'll also, when you add more travel downwards, we usually put up travel spacers on the car. So you kind of have a really similar amount of actual exposed travel, but you want to shift it downward because of that tire diameter.
Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
I definitely think, obviously with the carpet races that we do here in the States, it seems like Jason with JConcepts has like their, the dirt series and the carpet series, and kind of the evolution of the carpet tire in general. Like you mentioned, with the tire size changing, that also makes the car companies kind of have to reevaluate to compensate for the droop that's changing and the up travel, which we've learned a ton. I feel like for myself and for the team, tuning that kind of that window over a couple weeks ago at 702. So that's why we have all these adjustments. We kind of knew it was coming. I know the guys back over there in Europe, the Schumacher tires also kind of a smaller profile, kind of like the twin pins, and we kind of were starting to see some of the European transition with the setup stuff, and kind of our own little flair here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So Spencer, you'd mentioned it had been a couple of years since you were at 702. What'd you think of the layout overall there? I mean, was there a favorite section, or just kind of give a couple sentence summary of what you thought there?
Yeah, I thought the layout was actually pretty awesome. It seemed like the left side had the majority of the jumps, and the right side was all flat, kind of on road. I really like this intersection, which is the spot that I've actually crashed the most in, believe it or not. There was the little tabletop. You kind of send it into the corner and you turn and do the double. That was my favorite section. I felt the most comfortable. That was the section that did cost me a couple positions in the mains, but it's just part of racing.
Yeah, for sure. Like you were saying, that whole left side was pretty tight, and you had to be really precise with your line selection, where the right side was nice and flowing. I think that front double was kind of the most difficult jump on the track for a lot of people. Just the landing kept shifting a little bit as people would have to be marshaled there, or cars would crash or whatever. So that was the most challenging part for me, was just getting my timing on that front section, and then those little ripples through the corners added a little flair to that on-road section. But yeah, overall, like I told Dwayne when I was there, that one of my favorite carpet layouts I've ever driven on. So hopefully they can kind of keep that going. Last time I was there, they had seemed like a 40-foot triple that was pretty difficult to navigate at times. So overall, a lot of fun. You came into this race, Spencer, with really the only complete B6.3 that we had. We got a couple sample kits earlier. We sent it over to you to get built up, and you basically showed up to the event with the car. What was your general overall feelings of the build, kind of going into the event?
Yeah, I mean, when I got the sample kit, I was so excited to open the box and build it. And, you building it with the manual, kind of relearning everything. And, my general perspective of building it is as good as it always has been building the car. Obviously, with the new pieces, like the front shock tower cover, It kind of, protects the front shock tower. You also have the rear covers in the rear to protect the rear if you flip over. Just kind of the new kind of nitpicking accessories that come in the kit to build. I thought it was a very good build. I didn't have any issues building it. With the new rear end pieces, this new C&D mounts with the short arm, that was something that, in years past, we've learned that through development stages that we, like the longer arm on the high grip tracks. And we did a lot of testing with our carpet guys. And we kind of thought that this was the overall best package, doing the wide pivot short arm, but with the 69 millimeter bone. So when I was building, I was just really excited to kind of feel it out on the track. But overall, it was a clean build. I didn't have any issues. And I was pretty happy.
And can you talk about one of the big things that is with the new molded parts is the new steering drag link. Can you talk a little bit about, just give everyone your impression about the new material that's included on here? And I mean, when I assembled those parts, I know a lot of people are, freak out if anything's loose, but I was actually amazed at how tight the steering assembly was. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was something that I've always kind of noticed in previous builds, with the slop in the steering, like the ball cup that holds, it goes from the servo horn to the bell cranks. Yeah, I was so happy to see that we use that same material as the ball cups, in that kind of that gray looking material, and how it's snapped on. And I was kind of thinking when I was building, I'm like, I was really curious how this is going to last throughout a carpet of race, because when you're running on carpet, especially modified, you're kind of hidden and bouncing off pipes and crashing at the end of the straightaway. Which over the weekend I didn't break any parts, which was pretty funny. But after the weekend was over, we kind of checked kind of the wear and tear of like those ball cups for the steering link, and I didn't notice any difference in adding slop at all. It was still tight at the end of that race, which I know a ton of people have asked me how often do I replace them with the black ones, and I'm pretty stoked to say that we shouldn't have any problems with the new updated ball cups for the steering link.
Yeah, for sure. The original material was a little bit of a softer material, and so it would start out brand new tight, but then as you hit things, that hole slowly becomes oblong as it pulls, and the material just doesn't have the same. It's a little more elastic, which can be good for some cases, but obviously this new one it's kind of an upgrade, and it's more durable, and it's going to have more bite for the threads that go in it, and the hole is going to hold its shape better. But that was one of the things I know that was just kind of a nitpicking thing about the car, that when people build the new kit, they're really going to notice. And when I put everything on, I was like, holy cow, this is like better than so.
Yeah, another piece in that area, Kurt, maybe you can elaborate on, is the modification that we made to that top plate. I know those broken screws that go down through the steering bell cranks is another item that it doesn't seem like it should break, but obviously it does over time. It's such a long lever arm there. Can you explain the update that we made there?
Because it's not supported. I mean, there's some really good photos online, but basically the top, the little brace that goes across the two button head screws, there's a new version that comes with the top plate, and it has a keyed peg so that when, if you see the pictures, when you push the top plate on, it locks in so that those screws don't have any leverage to flex around. And it just gives it some support so that when you do crash and bang around stuff, you're not putting all that load through the screws in bending. It's in double shear, which means the top and bottom are both supported. So it should be just another headache removed as far as damage points. And the other cool thing that's not out yet, but I think we're going to put on the sheet, is we are working on some next generation factory team aluminum bell cranks. We had a set that we were testing with Spencer, and those are still in development. But that's going to be another cool thing we have coming out that we got to test at the race.
Yeah, it's always difficult to do that testing not in racing environments, as the competition is obviously the highest at those events. You kind of get a trial by fire, for lack of a better way to say it. So yeah, definitely impressed with what I saw on those. And Spencer evolved kind of throughout the event and just got more and more comfortable every time he was on the track. There's a couple other small details that we updated on the car overall. We added that wing brace or to the rear wing mount, trying to kind of reduce the flex there. I'm not sure how many of the top guys will use that just because it increases weight up high, but it is something that should increase the lifespan of those wing mounts for most club racers.
For sure, yeah. Those are, I don't know if people have probably seen pictures. Oh my gosh, we're flooded with questions too. But yeah, the new molded plastic, there's some good images. Basically what comes in the box is the updated molded parts. And if you'll notice, there's 2 holes in the sides right there, 1 in each one. And there's an optional factory team brace. So that way the 2 arms will have, with the brace in there, you get a little more stability for people that are bending those. But the updated molded parts are already quite a bit more durable. And those, because it's such a common part, those we had already sold out of them and we're ready to reorder them. So there's not a new part number for the plastic wing mounts. If you get them, you're going to get the updated parts, and it's all from the updated mold from here on out.
Perfect. Yeah, just to kind of put a button on all those kind of new gray pieces we've kind of talked about a little bit. We have that new front shock tower mount that no longer has the exposed shock screws in the front to collect dirt for the dirt racer guys, and then we also have the ears that go over the rear shock tower. Some of the carpet tracks are requiring that type of protection, so it was an easy way for us to address those concerns. I honestly don't remember, Spencer. Did you use those at the event or not? I don't remember.
Yeah, I have them on my car on the front cover, so you can see, and then on the rear, you can kind of see that they're on.
Yeah, it's just great to prevent the sharp edges from digging in on a carpet track.
I think it's awesome, especially running on tracks that are kind of abrasive. I used to put on carbon fiber towers all the time just because it looks cool. Now with the covers, you save a little bit of money on, not having to replace the shock tower for a carbon fiber part. And you can just simply just get the shock tower covers in the tree that it comes with. So pretty sweet.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on a majority of the little small detail improvements. There's a couple, I would say, major improvements that we've done with the car, most notably the C&D mount. But then we've also addressed some of the flex characteristics of the car overall. Kurt, you want to elaborate a little bit on kind of the theory behind the C&D block and all that?
For sure, yeah. I know Steve Chamberlain, one of our longtime guys, asked me the question. He said, what's the single one thing that you thought made the biggest impact? And I thought about it, and it was pretty clearly that the rear end is probably the biggest thing that when we tested it, the wider arm, the wider pivot with the shorter arms, and that basically keeps the wheels out at the same width, but lets us run 69 millimeter drive shafts. And when we built up those parts and tested it, it was hands down a huge improvement. And then the other interesting thing that we've kind of been testing, even on the old chassis, but ever since we figured it out, was changing the rear upper link and shifting that out as well was a really big change to make the car extremely predictable. So the new B6.3D and B6.3, the carpet and dirt setups kind of have the new baseline rear upper link. And the combination of those two things, the longer drive shafts don't bind as much on power, and the car is incredibly predictable as far as feeling when it's going to break loose, and then if it would break loose at all compared to the normal car. and the on-power traction, being able to drive and power out of the turns, was better. And so we tested it initially on dirt, and then Spencer ran it, and then we had Blake Champlin and his brother testing on carpet, and we all had positive feedback. So it's kind of a deviation that the original B6.2, when we first launched the 69 millimeter drive shafts, we had 2 different rear ends, but now you get the same parts in both kits, but we were able to kind of fine tune the setups. And then the chassis flex was, I would say, the other second big thing that really changed the handling, and that's simply taking the 2 side rails. Before, when the servo bolts to the side rails, you basically got something linking them across. And so as the chassis loads up and flexes, the whole back part of the chassis can flex, and then it hits a point where the front is more rigid. So now having the 2 of them separate and being able to move separate as the chassis flexes, it tends to, I would best describe it as, in the middle to exit of the corner, the front end tends to grip and hold the turn more instead of wanting to push out and chatter. And not to necessarily a point that it makes the car loose, but it gives you a better steering feel as far as picking up the throttle and leading the turns.
Yeah, I did some of the initial testing on this theory, kind of end of last summer, and kind of into the Surf City race. And I found personally that at OCRC, especially on their club racing scene where the grip's maybe a little bit lower than it is at the major events, that I really like the combination of the tie rod chassis brace along with the, I'm calling it the disconnected servo. I don't know what else to call it. So that's how I'm calling it. I just thought the car was a lot more forgiving. Like you're saying, out of the corners, it just kind of stayed on the front end a little bit longer and allowed you to kind of get that extra little bit out of the corner. But then one of the bigger pieces I found was when you would over jump certain sections of the track, the car would just absorb that shock even better, and you could just pick up the throttle even easier. So just like my small little errors really improved just by changing those flex characteristics of the car.
For sure, yeah. The new parts, like you mentioned, the other thing we wanted to put in the box is we felt that chassis tuning option with the battery brace was really valuable. And so we included the parts in the kit so that you can have that option. And I would say I've mostly used it on dirt. I know Rob Gillespie at the race in Vegas was running that option. He really liked the way it handled. It's going to kind of be a case-by-case thing, sometimes layout to layout, but I would say that the more flexible tie rod, it gives the rear of the chassis a little more side-to-side flex. And my observation is I would do that at a time where I want a little more rear traction. It gives you a little less steering, a little more rear traction into the turns, and it really changes the way the car leans and rotates. If you like the car to rotate a little slower and maybe give up a little bit of grip, you can run the more rigid waterfall brace. And if you like the car to have a little smoother rotation and being able to roll through the turns, I say like the back end tends to follow the front more through the turns, then the extra flex is the way to go. So it's cool. All the parts are in there. In the manual, we did the photography with the dirt car on there. It comes in both boxes, and it's in the manual. It shows you how to install it, and it's kind of listed as a tuning option, and you can build it with it. But I would say, on your first day out, that's definitely one of the things, to build up the assembly and take it and try it. And then also make sure when you're setting your battery posts, we say in the manual, you got to set the battery post heights so that they're the same height as your battery pack and that everything will fit down snug. So make sure you take care of that when you're going to run, especially when you're going to run that assembly. You don't want it loose. You want it snug to the battery.
Yeah, the flex stuff has been very important through a lot of our testing. And I know it is a lot to take in for someone that's just kind of, somewhat of an amateur in the hobby. But, learning what all this flex stuff does, like, when you were talking about the steering brace, or being directly bolted to the chassis. You know, I noticed a big difference when landing the jumps and turning as a one piece. And then but the biggest thing I felt was that kind of the feeling on the steering wheel up the faces of the jumps, especially like, you know, the tracks that are really big at like OCRC or Masters of Dirt, and of just like the increment feeling of the feedback that I'm getting through the car suspension to the wheel input from a driving standpoint. Having the servo bolted to the chassis was pretty big. I personally haven't tested a lot with the steering or the rear brace. I know we did some blind testing at OCRC. I'm actually going to be building my B6.3 dirt car here this weekend. So I might be going to the track to kind of run that on my own, see what it feels like, but I'm sure it's definitely going to be a personal preference.
Yeah, for sure. Just another, kind of evolution of the B6 platform overall. Spencer, you kind of said, it might be a little bit overwhelming for a newcomer, but this is the third generation of the. This is the fourth generation. Sorry, B6, B6.1, 0.2, and 0.3. So fourth generation of the B6 platform. So we're constantly looking for measurable ways to increase the performance or the tunability, or just giving us some more options for all these different surfaces that we're racing on. It's crazy to think back to when we debuted that B6 at the EOS and kind of where the car's at now. I mean, that was one of my most fun trips that I've ever had, and we did a really good job with the marketing of that whole campaign. And now we're 5 years later, 6 years later, and basically still running that same platform that's world champion, national champion, and just keeps going. So definitely excited about increasing.
I think the biggest thing that I'm most proud of from the team standpoint and the people behind the scenes is that we're really trying to make a difference for the people buying the kit, building it right out of the box and having their first impression. When I'm at the track at Hobby Action or any other Tenske races that I travel to, it's important to me to hear all of us, but important to all of us to hear feedback of how was it when you built the car right out of the box and just go out there and drive it. And, when we implemented this rear end stuff and, driving it, I was like, this is going to be huge for these guys that are going to be building this car from the kit setup or their own setup, or, putting, Dustin's or I's or Aiden's setup on the car. Just the initial first impressions going to be, a big time difference. And I think it's going to be a huge for our customers. So I'm happy, when I build the car out of the box, and like I said, I built this car, my B6.3 kit set up for the carpet car, and we made like 3 small adjustments at that 702 race. And I'm just like, I didn't even tune sway bars. I built it from the sway bars, the standard weights that they came in the car. And then as far as the dirt stuff goes, I think it's going to be big.
And then as far as extra parts, you got the full like shock upgrades on there. And then you got the aluminum bulkhead, which doesn't come in the kit, but everything else. And then you ran the factory team blue aluminum rear hubs, which we just launched.
Yeah.
And if anybody does have any questions, they do say B6.2 on the package. They're B6.3 compatible. And that's just the B6.2 series hubs. I've got the black versions on my car here, but they're offset. I get so confused with this backwards camera. The hub is offset a little bit forward on the B6.2 style. So that's why it's denoted that way. And it obviously uses the same caps as the B74. So those are the same compatible parts. You don't have to worry about them not fitting. Those go right on. Spencer has the blue ones on his buggy.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't take a whole lot of option parts to run it exactly like Spencer's did. The other big thing in the development that I know Brent had noted was this was your first time to run with the new slipper clutch setup. which the B6.3, the carpet version, has the same pads and spring like we use on the 4-wheel drive, which was a big leap forward. I don't know if you want to talk about that. It's kind of been sometimes a headache for people on carpet. Talk about your
gosh, yeah. I was when I was building the kit, I kind of didn't really realize that we were changing the spring. I knew we updated the spring on the 4-wheel drive. Then obviously we came out with the 11 millimeter smaller hole pads, right, Brent?
Yep.
How you want to indicate them. And as far as like the slipper consistency with the spring over the weekend, once I had those pads and set them, I had set it a little bit loose. Kind of, I wasn't really familiar how tight I should actually run the slipper for the carpet, and then I started to tighten it more and more, especially with the Octalock, spur gear as well, having extra, contact patch so the slipper pads don't kind of slide in the spur gear on and off throttle and under braking. I thought as far as consistency goes through the whole run, but there's no overheating problems. I personally ran the vented plates. It's just something that I've always kind of ran. I definitely don't think you absolutely need to have it to have a consistent slipper that works properly for both slipper plates. But that's what I ran. I ran the 11 millimeter pads, which is the smaller circle on the actual slipper pad. And the slipper spring was very consistent when you were setting it, especially through a long run. People don't really realize how hot and how critical the slipper is, especially racing on carpet. You want to be good through the whole run. And the 2 years ago that I actually ran a slipper fan on my car because there was always kind of some issues, small issues that, little inconsistency with the old spurgers we had, and then as far as the spring and nut goes. But I actually did run a slipper fan on my car over the weekend at 702 for that race, and definitely not necessary anymore. So it's been a pretty big improvement.
Kurt, we do have a question from RC Kevin here. We have 2 slipper pads that we offer. We offer the 11 millimeter ID and then also the 19 millimeter. Can you explain when and why you would use each of those?
Yeah, we have the 2 different options, and the 11 millimeter came out initially in development with the 4-wheel drive, and the goal of that was to have more power transmission. And so we did a bunch of analysis looking at, previously people had done, other cars in the market had some 3-plate clutches. And a lot of that was built around some of the older generation slipper pad materials. And the slippers, it's pressure plates. And the more you squeeze it and the more pressure you make, the more friction it has. And the problem with some of the other materials on the market is that they have a lot of stiction. The white pads and other stuff, which means it has a lot of initial drag, and then when it breaks away, it maybe can't transmit power. And so one of the cool things you get is the LCF material pads. They come in the box now, and that's a new generation material that we developed. It's kind of in a little bit of a different family of materials. And the best part about that LCF material is you don't have the extra drag at breakaway. So what we ended up doing, I worked on the design for that, and we were able to get the same power transmission as a conventional 3-pad setup by making the hole in the pad smaller down to 11 millimeters. So you got more surface area. And with other materials previously, you couldn't do that because it would stick too much and it would never break free. And then when it would break free, it would slip. With this material, the LCF material that now comes in the box, which it's a lot more expensive. So we're taking something that used to be a factory team level thing, and now it comes in the box. We're able to run the more surface area, and then that required a lot higher force. So that's why there's a new spring. It's the same spring as the 4-wheel drive. I mean, we're talking like it's twice as strong as the springs that we normally are running on these. So with that, we were able to get the power transmission. It's spread out over more area, so we have a really good like breakaway and power delivery, and the amount of power it can transmit and the heat is all reduced because it's spread out over so much more area. So that's kind of the 4-wheel drive for carpet, and the 4-wheel and the 2-wheel drive carpet where the tires aren't slipping at all. You basically can put down as much power as possible because there's not really a limit on things. So that I could also see it being good for like some of the heavier vehicles. People might end up trying that option on truck and short course. It really depends on power transmission and how much slip you want when driving. The 2-wheel drive cars are a lot lighter, and you really don't want to deal with on dirt. You don't want to spin the tires, and so we thought the bigger hole pads, the 19s, were the best for dirt. So
so an option for both styles of surfaces. Again, just kind of the flexibility of the kits, and then also just the optional parts that you can get for each of them. One of the pieces that the kits do come with, Kurt, is the new medium thickness pistons, the 2mm pistons. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about testing at the Surf City, this is where I ran those 2mm pistons, and just on the little small choppiness, I thought the car was a lot more forgiving. I think on the carpet track, Spencer and I both ran the standard 2.5mm thickness pistons. But again, it's just another way to tune your shocks. There's just so many small little variables that you can do inside of those shocks that having a thickness difference is another significant way to change the pack and the characteristics of the car handling.
Yeah, for sure. I think you nailed it. Both kits come with the 2mm thickness pistons. It's a 1.5 and 1.6 in the carpet, and 1.6, 1.7 in dirt. And those launched, we released them in January. So they have been available for a while now. And it's the one thing that probably next time we go back and run carpet, we'll spend a little more time getting familiar with. Some of our team setups that we had from the history weren't using them from some of the events last year. So I felt okay because we were trying to figure out so many other things, just kind of sticking with a shock that we had a little, personally, I hadn't ever run on carpet and Spencer hadn't. So we're just kind of trying not to get too in the weeds if we get we're to get lost. But I know on dirt, we run them pretty extensively, and I always need to give people the tip that because the piston, the oil's traveling through a shorter distance, you do need to run thicker oil. Which I think we put in the press release. So if you would be normally running 1.7s and 30 weight, I usually end up running 35 weight at a lot of the races. I know during the winter you might want to go softer, but it's at least 2.5, if not 5 weight. But those were really good for the small imperfections and being able to not pack out as fast. And so you could still get a shock that would still land good, but you'd feel like you had more traction on the low speed shock movements, and the car would feel more planted. So
Spencer, what's your experience been with the thin pistons? You've obviously tested them a little bit here and there. Have you settled on them in any specific conditions or any of the events over the last half a year?
I definitely played with them back at Hobby Action quite a bit. I know people like Kevin King have pushed me a ton to try them. At the time, it was our first released thin pistons, which were 1.5, I believe. And the initial impression when you put them in with a little bit of a thicker oil kind of concept, like what Kurt was saying, you kind of get the feel that the car has a little bit more movement. You kind of initially feel that it has a little bit more traction. But there's a couple of some downfalls that I've noticed with those particular pistons back then, with, you suffer a little bit of landing. And if you really push in the car, it can kind of get really deep into the travel. But with the new pistons, the new 2mm ones, I feel like are to have like more of like an in-between. And I feel like there's going to be a lot more potential for us racers and the customers to really take advantage of that kind of pack concept with running a little bit thicker oil and so forth. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be playing with more here in the future and kind of start developing that.
Yeah, another small tuning feature that we've added to the B6.3 is the overlapping holes on the shock towers. We've kind of settled on one or two positions almost all the time, and now with these overlapping holes, we can again fine tune those positions. So the rear shock tower now has 4 locations, and the front has 3, I believe. Kurt.
Yeah. And so, a good rule of thumb is the rear shock tower. With the new geometry, the arms are shifted out wider. So I always tell people there's 2 rules of thumb. Number 1 is because the shock bottoms are shifted out farther away from the center line, you need to go to a longer eyelet. So if you were running a short eyelet in the rear, you need to go to a +2. If you were running a +2, you need to go to a +4 to get more droop.
Which is our new.
Which is the new one. And those come in the new kit. They're on the new mold tree. And then the other rule of thumb was as far as shock angle, like the outermost location on the rear is similar to the shocks in the middle hole on a B6.1 rear tower. And then you can go inwards. And I know when we tested being able to lean the shock in on low traction dirt was a real advantage. And somebody else asked about running the rear end on a looser style track, and that's when I tested it. I did some testing there, and running JConcepts green what are they, sprinters and stuff like that, and it was a huge advantage for predictable traction. So I think people are going to like it a lot, and they're going to want to use those. I ran the number 2 hole in the rear tower, which is 1 from all the way in. But those options are there and really good for the 2-wheel drive on low traction. And then the front, just giving you some more fine tuning. The front's pretty standard that we stand them in the outside hole. But I know sometimes in our testing for especially places like trackside or a really small indoor track where you're really turning sharp, being able to have that fine increment and lean the shock in is something that you're going to want to play with.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that last time I was at trackside, that was one of the things that Cole Toller did that really yielded a lot of speed, and he went the full hole to that middle position. So, yeah, definitely nice to have those tuning options. Got another question here about the chassis. The chassis are new part numbers. Is this correct?
Yeah, the lower chassis are new part numbers. And essentially, the main difference that you're getting in the chassis is the drilled servo mount holes. They're actually in the exact same location as there's kind of a dead spot in the current servo mount where the plastic ear used to be above the chassis. So I tell people, if you're a real DIYer, you can use your plastic side rails and use the holes as a guide and drill through and drill and countersink it. And the servo will sit in the exact same spot. So if you're on a budget, you're a DIYer, it's not that big of a deal to do, as long as you can round up a 90-degree countersink bit to do the countersink for the flathead screws. There is a complete servo mount assembly. I don't know, Spencer, you want to talk about how much better was that to build than?
Well, as far as like the time standpoint to build it, it was dramatically different of just getting it built and done, and then just screwing it to the bottom of the chassis. It reminded me of kind of how the 4-wheel drive car builds. I mean, it's pretty easy. I like that it has the top mount, so you can mount like the transponder on top. I know, I'm not sure if it's released yet, but I think we'll have a factory team version of that top servo mount brace. It's about as, I believe it will be a carbon fiber. I think I saw you or Cole running it.
I think Cole had it. We gave him the whole servo mount assembly, and then Billy Hayden our other engineer. He worked on that design and it came out really good. And so, yeah, that's going to be an option when you buy. If you want to like upgrade your car and buy the whole servo mount assembly, it comes with the carbon fiber cross piece. And then for those people that have kits, the carbon fiber cross plate is available. I can even look up the part number here in a second while you guys talk.
Yeah, I got a personal question here from Daniel Chavez, who's the promoter for the Florida Carpet Championships. He was asking me, because I was one of the few people that raced both there and the 702 race. And, he was asking what I thought of the grip level between the two events. And, not having a lot of carpet experience and having a lot of time in between the two events, I personally thought they were very, very similar. I literally showed up to the JConcepts race with my car straight off the track from Florida. The same setup I raced the main event with, the B6.2 rear end pieces on it, and drove it for half a day's worth of practice, just getting back in the groove of carpet, and never traction rolled or anything like that. Made a small shock oil change adjustment and kind of just kept driving it. And then once I was more comfortable, just my own personal pace, and felt like I wasn't going to blow the car apart at any point, that's when I came over to Kurt and I got some of those parts to convert the rear end, and immediately came back from the first time running those pieces on carpet and said the development team did a good job. It was more stable and faster.
You were like, good job, team. That was way better.
Yeah. So, to go back to what Kurt said a while ago, that is probably the most significant change to the overall B6.3 geometry wise, but there's also a lot of little details that really make a difference in how the car performs and wears over time. But we didn't just race two-wheel drive there. We also ran four-wheel drive. So Spencer, Cole, and Lee, and Robbie, and some of the other guys, even the guys in the spec classes, the one-up team was there pretty heavily. And, we had a lot of success with the B74.1 as well. So obviously we've been working hard on evolving that car and that platform. The funny part or the ironic part is the last time Spencer drove on carpet was with the B74 original one at the debut. And obviously we've evolved a lot since then. Spencer was able to race to the win there in that class. And, I remember after A3, he came back and told me that, man, it was so comfortable to drive. I could have gone even faster if I had to, and just didn't have to. So, very impressed with kind of the working of the car throughout the event. We started with some of the stuff that I learned at the Florida race when Brock was on the team, and kind of evolved from there. So I don't know if Kurt and Spencer, you want to elaborate a little bit more on the changes that you guys kind of made throughout the event, and what you thought was the most important pieces there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the last time I ran that car, the B74, which was for the debut, a year passed from that. I know Kurt came on the kind of the team, kind of starting to work on like the 0.1 version, and a lot of the upgrades or the pieces that we kind of updated to improve that particular car, with the new C&D mounts, the new front rear towers, obviously a lot of testing and development with the center slipper, specifically for carpet, and just a lot of pieces to the puzzle that made that car really good, or much better out of the box for the first impression. Was a big factor going into this particular race, learning kind of what we've learned from our team guys when Brock was on the team, or Blake, Cole, Tollard, running at the carpet races in previous events. And what, it's funny, when we first showed up, I had a couple little boogers. I really didn't set the slipper right. Kurt, since he was kind of the slipper guru, when he was doing the testing development with that, he kind of hand fitted it, the magic test tune. That was awesome. When we first showed up, we were like, holy cow, we're a little bit off. And that's kind of the way it goes. Sometimes when you show up to a race, we were like, we have a lot of work to do. Made some great tuning options with the adjustable diff heights that the car has as the adjustability. We tuned a lot with the up travel because of the tire diameter size. We tuned a little bit with the flex. Some of our team guys are running the little bit of the thinner center splines. Cole, I was running the thicker ones, and my car was pretty good. So Cole changed his to the thicker ones, helping kind of get everyone up to speed as a team. He found some big improvements. As a whole, I really thought we made huge gains in the four-wheel drive car with the tuning with the shock oil. Just some small setting stuff that were a little bit off with the sway bars and adjustability. Yeah, I mean that was the whole piece to the puzzle. Just making small tuning options, figuring out the speed and consistency, and of course watching some of the competition with Cavallari and Brock, what their speed was. So yeah, maybe if I missed anything, Kurt, if you want to add anything to that, that'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, I know since last time we did four-wheel drive, I mean, the big thing is running them really lightweight on carpet with the low-profile battery shifted all the way forward. And yeah, I would say the chassis stiffness thing, as far as racers out there go, the braces that Spencer ran are the 2.5 millimeter thick, which make the chassis more rigid. And I know when Cole was running the 2 millimeter parts, he was having a problem going into the corner and three-wheeling, and making the chassis more rigid instead of letting the chassis flex up. It keeps the whole car more rigid and maybe less weight transfer to the front. And when you're going into the corners and it's loading up, it kind of kept everything planted. And he said that was a lot easier to drive. So that's definitely something to keep in your box. And those are listed as the B74 chassis brace. The new ones for the 74.1, you get a front and a rear and a bag, but the old part numbers, you got a single and a bag. So you got to get two part numbers if you want to get those. But you can look those up. And I thought that was a really big deal as far as from what doesn't come in the kit. I know we played around with the roll bars and ended up, we kind of tested the 1.8 roll bars and the 1.9, and we thought the front end felt the best with, we tried a 1.7 and 1.8. And then we ended up leaving the front roll bar, but we just had a little too much understeer. So we went up to the 1.9 rear. And then the really interesting thing was the diff oil package that we ended up running. I know it's pretty standard for a lot of guys to run a thicker rear diff on carpet, so you get good turn in and on power. And although the thick diffs felt really good, we actually ended up, dropping down a step, and that ended up maybe being a little harder to drive, but it rolled through the corners a lot faster. And
yeah, that was very interesting.
That was an interesting lesson. But the four-wheel drive was really good. I know the other thing that that you ran is the JConcepts 22.4 front wheel with a 5 millimeter hex, and I would say that's kind of the equivalent of running like a 6 millimeter hex with the associated brand wheel. So for other guys that want to try that setup, the pills were in just the middle, like standard width pills, but running a little bit wider hex to push the tire out a little bit wider. That was one of the big things we did as far as dialing in the front end that I thought ended up working really well. And then
yeah, I mean, I definitely think people can get a little bit carried away with the diff oils, knowing that it is kind of really high bite. You really want to run really thick. That's kind of the standard go-to. But I would definitely keep in mind that, when we noticed when we were running the really thick, it, carrying through the apex of the corner, it kind of like binds the car and slows it down. It doesn't carry that speed. So there is definitely a fine balance with the thinner diff oils. I ran 10 in the front and pretty much It was a mixture of 10 and 15, so you could say it was 12. But I thought the parts that kind of made the biggest difference was the diff oils. Obviously, I already had the thinner splines, and to add to that was the up travel limiting. Given the tire diameter size, I limited the up travel in the front and rear quite a bit to kind of give it that more of a traditional looking up travel, like how my dirt cars are. But overall, it's important to make sure you have the right, front and rear. Shock oil, we ran pretty thick. I don't even run that thick in 8-scale racing, the big boy cars, as Richard says. I think we ran like 50 or 55 weight in the front and 40 in the rear. So, I think a little bit of part of why that is so difference, like the percentage wise to 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive. I think you're just carrying so much more speed and G'ing the car out so much more with the weight transfer. I just definitely think that for whatever reason, the thicker shocks kind of slow that down. Obviously, there is a fine balance. I really didn't feel like at all during the week, that particular week where my car was three-wheeling. I know there was a lot of talk in the pits, people were trying to figure out how to not get their car to do that. But we're, kind of seemed like we were in the right ballpark for geometry and shock oils when we first showed up. So I was stoked on how the car drove. I told Brent after that main, I'm like, dude, this thing's so good. I'm like, I can be up there for so long driving this thing. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, it when we first showed up, it definitely wasn't like that. It was, there was a lot to learn. It wasn't that the car wasn't that good. There were just some pieces of the puzzle that just weren't quite right. And we kind of used our knowledge, made some good setting changes to the car, worked on the power, got more comfortable with the carpet in general as a driver for myself. And it was pretty good. So, coming back to the original, when we first opened up this live video, the carpet racing in general here in the States, there's such a big, wide variety of carpet tracks. When I raced 2 years ago for the carpet series, I was going to places like Portland for that carpet race, and some of the smaller tight tracks are going to go into Connecticut for the AstroTurf race. They have an indoor kind of carpet track. It's very small and tight. And then for the last year, I kind of didn't do much carpet racing at all. I kind of watched Brock and Blake and Cole do a lot of these carpet races, and watching through the video, giving them some opinion or direction through the phone for setup advice is much easier than when you're actually there for yourself, trying to figure it out. So, a lot of these tracks, it seems like we're trying to find a lot more steering. Nowadays, the cars are so set up properly where you can add a ton more steering in, where in years past, we kind of detuned the front end so you could have less steering so the car wouldn't flip. So with the evolution of the tires changing, the low center of gravity, the power, the axle height, and all that stuff, been a big difference for the racing that we do nowadays.
For sure. Yeah. I think just what you were saying there about kind of watching from the sidelines and then getting back into things, it's a totally different atmosphere. It's easy to armchair a lot of this. And we're going to bring somebody into the studio here that has had a lot of racing experience and actually just recently switched over to the Team Associated cars. So I'm going to add in One Up Racing's Matthew Gonzalez. Welcome, Matthew.
How's it going?
Good to see you.
Yo.
So Matthew got the win in the 13.5 4-wheel drive class, right?
Yep.
You haven't had a great race with Davey Bada and a couple other people in the 17.5 2-wheel drive class. Didn't quite go your way on that one, but obviously you're one of the guys that's kind of switched over to the Team Associated cars here in the last few months with the One Up team. What's your general opinion been kind of coming on board?
Yeah, no, like the kind of the first basis of going to the cars, they were way easier to drive than my previous stuff. I think it's lot less of a Dremel going on these cars. Just kind of cut and dry, just building up and going from there. Going to this carpet race, I haven't had a lot of time on the 4 with carpet stuff, so I just kind of threw on whatever I thought would kind of work, and just went from there throughout the weekend. Just kind of went up in oils from what I normally would run, and then it was pretty cut and dry from there.
Yeah, I think it was
even one of
pretty
the
cool.
guys.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Spencer.
I was saying I thought it was pretty cool seeing you come running from Yokomo and seeing kind of the transition of how you've been with the associated cars. I saw you run the cars at SDRC, and I thought your stuff looked pretty good for that Top Gun races when you kind of were running the cars, in kind of the transition. And I thought it kind of opened your eye a little bit, like, wow, the car stuff makes a pretty big difference when everything's kind of working right. And you live and you learn when you get older. I feel old saying that, but definitely pretty happy to see you doing well, and watching that carpet race at 702 with the forward drive run and the cool battles you had with Davey. It was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been from Top Gun, I just kind of built the 2-wheel to something close to what you ran at Beach RC, and then kind of made my own changes from there. And then, it's been pretty easy, just kind of messing with tires pretty much the whole time, and then not messing with setup too much anymore.
Yeah, just really working on the driving part of the hobby, right? That's one of the things that we've worked on, you and I, over the past 5 years, is less fidgeting and more driving, line selection, racecraft, that type of stuff. And couldn't be prouder of the effort that you've been putting in and the results that you've been getting for not only Team Associated, but also for One Up and the rest of your sponsors. It's been fun to watch, and glad to see you running our products. So thanks for joining us. Might bring you back in for the next one.
Yep,
So,
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Matthew.
Yep.
See you.
So, the one thing I was Barry Baker, shout out to Barry. He was asking about carpet or dirt and just tying it back in. I think one of the most surprising things, hopefully this is interesting to everyone, was the jumping and landing and how critical on the carpet it was. And I know you were just talking about the up travel. I had like 90% of my crashes were from over jumping, and that's the weird thing about carpet racing is I love all the driving smooth and everything, but you're going so fast, and then you got to go for these jumps, and it was like I had to basically like coast, and it was so like anti-intuitive, and I was like, I should be running a slower motor. Even though
I knew this was going to come up.
Spencer was like calling me an old grandpa, but I was like, I'm just going to do faster laps. I don't need to be fast on the straightaway. So I just kept slowing it down, and even in the end, I felt like as I drove faster, then I had to slow down even more because I was carrying more speed in the turns, and it was just. I like carp racing. I might have to go race 13.5 with Matthew. But what did you think, Spencer, about the other thing we're talking about changing the up travel? Was I did notice some stability, like when I'm landing and hitting jump faces, that's one area that I could really tell when I put the up travel limiters in, because when your car, no matter what, is going to bottom out. It's just how much extra wonky room it has.
Well, the definitely the biggest thing, or that I'm seeing with these carpet races, especially like we're talking about the tire diameter size, getting the droop at the wheel back to the same as traditional, or whatever you want to call it. And then as far as up traveling goes, I mean, it seems like if you do have a lot of up travel, that you'll tend to feel that when the car G's out, a lot of the energy that it's going through the chassis flex, the plastic of the arms, through the towers, then hitting the shocks. You're really not. It's almost acting like a recoil, a spring, and then it kind of double dribbles or bounces back at you, and you get like a negative feedback to the wheel, and then the car like flips or bounces and then flips. When tuning the up travel to a more traditional amount, the chassis itself, doesn't bottom out as much and takes a lot of the force and the energy through the chassis flex, through the shock towers, then hitting the shocks. You'll feel a little bit more traditional, like you do run on dirt. And when I was watching, some of you being kind of your first rodeo on carpet, or even kind of the other kind of people that were kind of running the intermediate class or the novice class, it's like an optical illusion. You're going through the end of the sweeper, you're carrying all this speed, and then you kind of let go of the gas, and like you don't have enough speed to do the jump. And then the next time you come around, you give it more gas and you over jump it by like 10 feet. And what people kind of can't exactly comprehend initially is that you're forgetting the aspect of when you're hitting the transition to the jump, that actual part of the wood is taking a G-force and acting like a spring, and you kind of need to use that to your throttle window of when you're jumping that jump and you're kind of downsiding. It's very difficult to grasp at first, and then when you kind of understand the idea of when you do hit the transition, your car G's out and it slows down so much up that face because it's just scrubbing on the chassis. I mean, you can kind of see, I used black tape. You can kind of see over here, this is all just G'ing out either on the faces or the landings to the side here. We're taking all that into effect. When I had the up travels not in the car, I cleaned it off and I saw how much more it was actually scrubbing and the speed on the jumps or in the corners. And for instance, like my forward drive right here where we limited a lot, I mean, you can still kind of see there's still a ton of black residue from the carpet. Where before the whole front end had black stuff all the way down the side with no up travel in there. So once you kind of start to kind of tune that window and you kind of get a better, more consistent driving style when hitting the jumps and downsiding, that's really the biggest the piece of the puzzle of the carpet. If you can figure out how to jump those jumps and land on the downside end of the pockets, as we call it, the car doesn't get unsettled at all, and we're able to just carry more speed, where if you do land a jump and you want to turn, it's just going to flip instantly. So there's a lot more pieces of the puzzle than just picking up the radio and driving. I wish everyone can kind of get that that feeling, but when you do it, it's so awesome, especially when you're doing it for 5 minutes, racing for the win. It's an incredible feeling, and that's stuff that people can work on with tuning the shocks, with up travel and the down travel. That's kind of the biggest thing. That's where I feel like people have the hardest time, and that's why when I first got there, I'm like, is carpet better than dirt, or is dirt better than carpet? I still think that you have a little bit more give in dirt. I know people that race on carpet, they feel like it has all this more traction and so forth. But when you're having problems, it's a lot more exponential because you're breaking stuff. It's so much more faster. You're breaking stuff so much more quicker.
Things go downhill fast.
But with the dirt track, you get to stay in the line. It's just a lot of give and take. There's a lot of pros and cons to both segments.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you race everything under the sun if it has 4 wheels and is off-road, from 8 scale to 10 scale carpet to 10 scale dirt, truggy. About the only thing you're not racing these days is the touring cars. Obviously, your schedule's pretty full when it comes to attending the events, prepping the vehicles, seeing the orders for the equipment of the stuff that you need. So
yeah,
that's a lot of the unseen stuff that people don't really see when they see Spencer Rivkin standing on top of the podium, is all the prep work that you put in, and that's something that I'm sure you've learned over the years to maximize your time and really take advantage of the time that you do have, and get ahead of the game so you're not constantly scrambling. This makes such a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting my stuff done for the exact race right now. I leave next week for the Cycle Nitro Blast, and I'm working on my 10 scale stuff for that exact race at OCRC. So yeah, it's definitely, people don't see it. It seems so easy to them in front of the picture, but behind the scenes, as along with a lot of other professional athletes that do, biking, basketball, football, there's a lot of preparation.
For sure. Yeah, so let's hit a couple of these rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap things up. I got Benjamin James here. He's going to be building his first kit, and just asking if there's any particular advice. And I actually have a neighbor who's just building his first RC car as well, and it's really easy to kind of get ahead of yourself and think how stuff assembles. But the one piece of advice I would give is just make sure you really know the pieces that you're putting on are exactly what the manual says. Screw lengths, things on the B6 like the trailing axle. I caught the kid putting one 3mm trail and one 4mm trail on, and just really paying attention to that detail stuff. And then the other piece that I would say is, Benjamin, if you want to catch Spencer on his next live feed, if you have some stuff already done with your car, he's pretty good about answering questions throughout the actual broadcast specific to those builds. So, enjoy it. Also, don't be afraid to hit up your local shop or your local track and find your team associated representatives. We're all over the world. Those guys will be more than happy to give your car a once over and make sure you're on the right track when you get out there. Clay Falk asked about posting setup sheets. We will have the B6.3 setup sheets posted probably within the next week or so, which is when we're also hoping to have the kits shipping. So you should be seeing those at the hobby shop sooner than later. Some of the parts will be trickling out as well, timed with that. I actually just posted your B74.1 setup, Spencer, so I'll post that link here in the comments. Not really anything special on that. Like you were saying, just kind of getting all the pieces working as they're supposed to. I think probably the most significant aftermarket part that you had was the ProTech carbon fiber side guards that you said, saved almost 20 grams worth of weight, which, in any form of racing, that's a big difference, but especially on modified carpet four-wheel drive, that's a huge savings. So that's all listed on there. I think that's kind of it. And Kurt, do you want to kind of elaborate on some of the pieces that are coming out here in the next
we've got some press releases and stuff coming. One of the things that we've been testing over the past few months, I was going to mention Spencer's four-wheel drive. He did run the optional rear shock tower and shock bodies, the 31, the bigger shock body, which is larger volume. But then we've just also been in some development. I know a lot of people have asked about hard parts availability, and we've been testing a replacement material for the hard. So look for that to come out really soon. It's really cool. It's got some. It's got the word carbon in the name. So we got some lightweight options that are coming out. We're getting everything ready to release the public, and I know Spencer got to run some of the parts on his car at the race in Vegas, and so the intent there is to have a lightweight and more rigid and more durable part. So that's an exciting thing that we've got coming. That's just a little teaser. I can't tell you everything about it, but look for more information coming out on that hard material replacement.
Yeah, definitely one of the most asked questions recently. So I'm sure everybody will be excited to hear about that, and check your inbox, social media, all that stuff here in the next few days, weeks, months to kind of follow up on that. But just to finish up, thanks for joining me. Great to have Spencer and Kurt on our broadcast here, and look forward to doing some more. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.